The Grand Masterclass event was packed with martial arts enthusiasts from around the world. Cameras flashed, fans cheered, and legendary black belt icons were invited to share their wisdom. Among them stood two names that shaped the industry, Chuck Norris and Steven Seagal. Chuck arrived quietly. No dramatic entrance, no spotlight. Just a humble legend in a simple black jacket, greeting students with a slight nod and calm smile. He stood at the back, observing, letting the younger generation take center stage. Steven Seagal, however, walked in differently. Slow, confident steps, sunglasses still on indoors, surrounded by a group of followers. The room quieted as he stepped toward the microphone. With all due respect to past legends, Seagal began, glancing toward Chuck without naming him directly. Martial arts today demand youth, agility, and fresh energy. A few heads turned toward Chuck, sensing the subtle dig. Chuck didn't react, he simply smiled. Seagal continued, bolder now. Some people here were great in their time. But let's be honest, those days are gone. You can't expect a man in his 70s to still keep up with modern fighters. Whispers erupted. A ripple of tension spread across the room. All eyes turned to Chuck. He remained calm, arms folded, watching Seagal speak, as if analyzing every word, not emotionally, but technically. A student standing nearby whispered, "Is he really talking about Chuck Norris?" Seagal smirked. "I'm not naming anyone, but there are people here who should enjoy retirement instead of clinging to past glory." Chuck softly stepped forward, not angry, just present. His voice calm, deep, respectful. "Steven," he said, "I believe strength doesn't disappear with time. It evolves. Experience outlasts youth." The room fell completely silent. Seagal gave a small laugh. "We'll see about that." Chuck's response? Just a quiet nod. But the way he looked at Seagal, it said everything. Chuck didn't react with anger. He reacted with silence. But what happened next? Steven Seagal would never forget. The atmosphere in the training hall shifted subtly, but unmistakably after Chuck's calm response. Students, fighters, and even instructors leaned in slightly, sensing this conversation might escalate. Some reached into their pockets to subtly unlock their phones, just in case something worth capturing happened. Steven Seagal, picking up on the crowd's growing interest, adjusted his collar with deliberate theatricality. He walked slowly across the mat, hands behind his back, circling Chuck. It was more of a performance than a discussion now. "You know, Chuck," Steven said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "there's a difference between wisdom and limitations. And sometimes, people confuse the two." Chuck stood in the center of the room, relaxed posture, not making eye contact but fully aware. He didn't respond. The silence made Steven even more uneasy. The audience began whispering. "Why is Steven pushing this? Chuck hasn't said anything disrespectful. This doesn't feel right." But Steven kept going, determined to get a reaction. "Experience is valuable," he continued. "But in a real fight, on the mat or in the ring, reflexes decide the winner. And no amount of slow meditation or old-school training can replace speed." He glanced at Chuck, pausing, especially when age takes it away. A few gasps. Heads turned between them. Chuck slowly looked up, but still said nothing. To some, that silence was intimidating. To Steven, it was infuriating. He stepped closer. "Let me put it this way. If someone were to challenge me right now, I'd be confident I could handle it. But if someone challenged you," he shrugged, "well, I'm not sure you'd even make it through the opening move." A hush fell over the room. Even Steven felt it. Chuck nodded once, still calm. "Steven," he said quietly, "a warrior's strength lies not in his speed, but in his timing." The words landed like a soft punch, nothing aggressive, but impossible to ignore. There was a pause. One student at the back whispered, "He's not defending his reputation. He's defending the art." Steven tilted his head. "Timing him? So if right now, right in front of everyone, I asked you to demonstrate your timing against me, you'd accept?" Chuck didn't answer immediately. He looked around the room at the young fighters watching. Some were nervous, some excited, many conflicted, caught between two legends. Finally, Chuck replied, "I don't believe in proving myself through force, but if it helps teach something valuable, I won't walk away." Steven smirked. "Good. Because I'd hate for this moment to pass unnoticed." Someone in the crowd muttered, "It's already unforgettable." A few phones were lifted openly now. The energy in the air had changed completely. It was no longer a casual seminar. It was the beginning of a moment history would remember. Chuck took a slow breath, loosened his shoulders. No aggression. No ego. Just readiness. Steven took a step back, preparing. A young fighter whispered to his friend, "One wrong move, and this could get real." Then the camera zoom in moment, before things escalate. Tell me in the comments, from which country or city are you watching this story? Also, who do you think will handle this moment better? Chuck or Seagal? Back to the story. Chuck raised his hand gently. "Steven, let's keep it respectful." Seagal nodded but didn't break eye contact. "Respect," he said, "is earned in the moment." Chuck gave a faint smile. "Then let's allow this moment to speak." The room vibrated with tension. Every phone aimed. Every heart paused. Even before any demonstration began, everyone knew this would be one of those scenes talked about for years. And Steven Seagal might have just crossed into something he wasn't ready for. Voiceover transition. The challenge was set. Neither man had moved yet, but the battle had already begun. What happened in the next few seconds would silence the entire hall. The room was silent, too silent. Not a whisper, not a cough, just the sound of controlled breathing from two seasoned warriors. Chuck Norris stood calm, hands loosely by his side, eyes steady. Steven Seagal paced slowly in front of him, rolling his shoulders like a man preparing for a scene in a movie. But this was no rehearsal. "Let's be clear," Seagal said, his voice deeper now. "I don't want to hurt you, Chuck." Chuck raised an eyebrow slightly. "I appreciate the concern. But," Seagal continued, "if we're going to demonstrate skill, let's not pretend it's equal. I've been active. You've been retired." The words were spoken softly but landed hard. A few people winced. Chuck didn't flinch. Inside the crowd, a young woman, an aspiring martial artist, whispered to her brother, "He's trying to provoke him." But Chuck isn't playing that game. Seagal spread his arms theatrically. "I'll even start slow, just so we keep it safe." "Safe?" someone muttered. From Chuck. Chuck nodded once. "Whenever you're ready." Students moved back to make space. Phones were already recording. Some went live on social media. The atmosphere was electric. Seagal took position, lowering his stance. He looked confident, strong, a skilled martial artist with decades of training. But there was something tense in his eyes, maybe even a hint of anticipation or unease. Chuck stood naturally, no fighting stance, no posture, just a man standing. "Are you ready?" Steven asked. Chuck nodded softly. "Yes." Seagal made the first move, a controlled wrist grab, meant to show dominance. It was slow enough that Chuck could counter if he chose. He didn't. The crowd tensed. Why didn't Chuck move? Seagal smirked. "See? Reflexes. Timing." Then, faster, Seagal tried to transition to a shoulder lock. And in that exact moment, Chuck moved. No force. No aggression. Just a simple shift. His hand gently redirected Seagal's, stepping aside almost effortlessly. The motion was so subtle that half the audience didn't catch it in real time. But Seagal did. He froze mid-motion, realizing his balance was gone. Chuck didn't push. He simply let gravity do the rest. Seagal stumbled one step forward, not falling, but losing posture. A microphone picked up soft laughter from someone in the back. Seagal's jaw tightened. Chuck spoke calmly. "Timing. So that's how we're doing this?" Seagal asked, a flash of irritation passing over his face. Chuck shrugged. "You chose the pace." Seagal's pride took the hit harder than any physical move. He straightened fully, eyes locked in challenge. "Again," he said. He went in quicker this time. A wrist strike, followed by an elbow attempt. Faster, sharper. Chuck stepped back, barely moving, letting the strike pass. Then, with a slight tilt of his elbow, he redirected Seagal's arm. Seagal's mass worked against him. He stumbled again, hard. A collective gasp swept through the room. Someone whispered, "He's making Steven work against himself." Chuck stepped forward slightly, voice calm. "Sometimes the hardest opponent to face is your own ambition." Seagal stood still, breathing heavier now. His frustration was clear, but so was his respect, just beginning to rise. And that's when the tension peaked. If someone questioned your ability because of age, would you stay calm like Chuck or prove them wrong? Let me know in the comments. Back to the scene. Seagal looked down, nodding slowly. "One more," he said, tone softer now. But this time, full speed. Chuck didn't react, but the energy shifted. The crowd stepped even further back. No words were said, but everyone felt it. This time, it wouldn't be a demonstration. It would be a moment of truth. Seagal took his stance seriously. No theatrics, no performance, just a martial artist. He charged, with precision, speed, control. And Chuck didn't move. Not immediately. He waited. In that silent fraction of a second where intention becomes motion, Chuck stepped in. One tiny movement. One tap on Seagal's wrist. One shift of weight. The room gasped. Steven Seagal didn't fall, but his stance collapsed, his attack broken before it began. All he could do was step back and stare. For the first time in the entire event, Seagal nodded. A nod of respect. Not defeat, but acknowledgement. Chuck gave a quiet nod back. No words. None needed. The moment spoke for itself. The crowd had just witnessed something incredible. But what happened next would change the tone completely. It was no longer about skill. It was about honor. The whisper that changed everything. The atmosphere around the dojo shifted like a sudden gust of wind. Steven Seagal stood there, arms folded, smirk still intact, while Chuck silently adjusted his training wrap. The students inside the gym stood frozen, unsure whether to intervene or continue watching. The silence lingered, heavy and tense, until suddenly, the door creaked open. An elderly man, a former martial arts trainer who had coached many greats over the years, slowly walked in. His eyes scanned the room, then landed on Chuck Norris. He paused. A glimmer of recognition flickered through his gaze. Then, almost unintentionally, he whispered under his breath. That's Chuck Norris. One student overheard and repeated it louder. Another confirmed. Within seconds, the room buzzed like a hive. Wait, Chuck Norris? The Chuck Norris. The undefeated karate champion? The man with over 30 black belts? The guy Steven once claimed was his inspiration? The whispers echoed across the dojo like wildfire. Seagal noticed the change. His smirk wavered. He glanced around, uneasy. Chuck, maintaining his calm, simply nodded to the old trainer in acknowledgement. He still hadn't spoken a single word. The crowd that had initially sided with Seagal now felt embarrassed for cheering at Chuck's expense. Even some of Steven's students stepped back, unsure of their master's approach. The energy shifted toward Chuck, not because he demanded it, but because respect arrived on its own point. One young fighter stepped up and said, "Sir, with all due respect, if that's really Chuck Norris, maybe we should." Seagal snapped back sharply. "I don't care if he's the president. He's too old. Respect is earned in the moment, not borrowed from the past." Chuck finally looked up, eyes steady. "Steven." The crowd went silent. Even Seagal froze. Chuck's voice was calm but powerful. "Respect isn't borrowed from the past." He took a slow step forward. "It's proven every day, through your actions, how you treat people, and how you control your ego." The words landed like precise strikes. Whispers returned. This time they weren't mocking, they were admiring. A group of martial artists from different disciplines entered: Muay Thai, Jiu-Jitsu, Taekwondo, having been invited earlier for a friendly gathering. One of them, a Brazilian fighter, smiled. "In Brazil, we say, the ocean doesn't brag about its depth." Another followed from Japan, bowing respectfully. "In karate, true strength is shown in silence." All of them turned toward Chuck. Steven looked unsettled, his confidence shaken by the collective recognition. He tried to laugh it off. "Okay, so you're all impressed by stories. Fine. But today it's real. Let's see if the legend still holds." Chuck didn't respond immediately. His eyes drifted to a group of younger fighters watching nervously. "A real fighter," Chuck said softly, "doesn't seek to prove others wrong, but to prove himself right." The room felt absolutely quiet. Even Seagal hesitated. Finally, Chuck raised his hand and signaled everyone to step back. He looked at Steven and said, "If you still want to do this, we do it with discipline. No anger. No ego. Just martial arts." Steven paused. The arrogance returned, though weaker. "Fine," he said. "Let's see if the legend still moves like it used to." Chuck simply replied, "Legends don't move like they used to." He tightened his wrap. "They move better." The crowd reacted in stunned silence. Some gasped. Others smiled. A few whispered, "This won't end well for Steven. Chuck hasn't even warmed up yet." At that moment, a camera phone clicked. Someone started a live stream quietly. Steven Seagal challenges Chuck Norris, live. What happens next, nobody is ready for. More people began recording. Viewers started joining in. Comments began popping up online. No way this is real. If Chuck speaks like that, imagine how he fights. Someone stop Seagal before he regrets this. But it was too late. Steven nodded toward the center mat. Chuck stepped up calmly. The arena went silent. 2 men, 1 ring, 1 truth about to be revealed. And then, the bell rang. If you knew Chuck Norris would still dominate even at his age, type legend in the comments right now. And before part 5 drops, who do you think wins this clash? Let me know below. The moment Chuck spoke with his fists, the bell echoed through the dojo like a challenge from destiny itself. Steven Seagal adjusted his stance, his expression now serious, ego wrapping around him like armor. He expected Chuck to come forward aggressively, to prove himself. Instead, Chuck stood calmly at the edge of the mat, his posture relaxed, almost too relaxed. In the silence, Seagal barked, "Come on, Grandpa? Let's see if you can still keep up." Chuck didn't move. He simply replied, "Why rush? You're the one running out of time." A ripple of murmurs filled the room. Seagal growled and stepped forward, launching the first move, a palm strike aimed at Chuck's chest. Fast, strong, aggressive. Chuck didn't dodge. He stepped into it, redirected the attack using Seagal's own momentum. Steven stumbled. Gasps exploded across the room. Chuck spoke softly. "Control the force, don't challenge it." Seagal's pupils widened. He lunged again, this time a rapid hand combination followed by a low kick. His movements were powerful but driven by irritation. Chuck countered with simple precision. 1 sidestep, a light tap to the wrist, a shift of balance. He didn't strike hard. He didn't need to. Each motion disrupted Seagal's rhythm. The room was stunned silent. Even the livestream comments started flooding. Chuck isn't even fighting. He's playing with him. This is surgical. Steven swings like a storm. Chuck moves like the wind. Seagal, now visibly frustrated, threw a high roundhouse kick. Impressive flexibility for his age, but it lacked sharpness compared to the disciplined years of Chuck's training. Mid-kick, Chuck turned his body slightly, caught Steven's leg under his arm, held it, perfectly still. The entire crowd froze. The livestream counter spiked instantly. People couldn't believe what they were witnessing. Chuck looked Steven directly in the eyes and said, "You're strong, Steven, but strength without humility leads to self-destruction." Then, with a gentle release, he lowered Seagal's leg. No strike. No show of dominance. Just control. The dojo was silent. Seagal's face reddened. Ego clashing with reality. He roared in anger and charged at Chuck with a shoulder rush. This time, Chuck finally moved. 1 fluid motion. A step to the side. A palm strike to the chest. Not brutal, just enough. Steven hit the mat. The room erupted in disbelief. But Chuck stepped back, raising his hand to calm the cheers down. "Nobody celebrates this," he said. His voice carried across the dojo. "Because I didn't come here to defeat Steven." He looked at Seagal. "I came to remind him." Seagal, still on the mat, looked up, anger fading, replaced by an unexpected emotion. Respect. Steven slowly got up, massaging his ribs. He didn't speak for a moment. Then, with a heavy breath, he muttered, "You still move like a warrior." Chuck responded, "A warrior never stops training, even when the world stops watching." The line struck deeper than any punch could. The martial artists in the room, from all disciplines and countries, applauded, not for the fight, but for the philosophy. Then Chuck added, "Fighting isn't about proving someone wrong. It's about proving you're still right." Seagal nodded slowly. The tension eased. Crowds around them started cheering, not for the victory, but for the lesson learned. The live stream chat exploded. "This is why Chuck is legend. Most graceful KO I've ever seen. He defeated him without humiliation." Chuck walked toward Seagal and extended his hand. Seagal looked at it for a moment, then took it. It wasn't a handshake. It was surrender, an acceptance. Suddenly, a young student recorded the moment and said softly, "The world needs to see this. How respect defeats arrogance." Chuck heard him and turned around. "Show them this." He pointed not to the fight footage, but to the moment of handshake. Because the real victory happened right here. He tapped gently over his heart. The room stood and applauded. Seagal looked down, humbled, not by physical defeat, but by moral triumph. Have you ever seen someone win without needing to hurt the other person? Comment "real strength" below if you believe true warriors walk away with respect, not revenge. The video of the moment Chuck Norris extended his hand to Steven Seagal spread across social media like wildfire. But unlike most viral videos that highlight conflict, this one highlighted dignity. Within hours, every major platform had clips circulating, not of the moment Steven fell, but the moment Chuck helped him back up. That single frame, two martial arts icons, one humbled, the other humble, became the image of the day. This is how real fighters resolve things. Chuck's control is more powerful than any punch. He didn't beat Seagal, he taught him. Comments poured in from all over the world. One ex-Marine wrote, "In combat training, they tell us real strength isn't in striking, it's in restraint." Chuck showed the highest level today. A martial arts coach from South Korea added, "That was Bushido in its purest form." Within 24 hours, the clip hit viral pages on Instagram Reels, TikTok, Facebook Watch, and YouTube Shorts. News outlets picked it up, highlighting Chuck's legendary composure, not his physical ability. Meanwhile, Steven Seagal remained unusually silent on the incident. He canceled scheduled press interviews and avoided social commentary. But then, something unexpected happened. Seagal posted on his official page, "Today, I was reminded that age does not define strength, and ego does not define leadership. Chuck Norris taught me without aggression, only truth. I respect him more today than ever." The internet reacted. Wait, Steven actually admitted it. That's character development. Respect gained. Even Chuck replied with a simple comment. Growth begins where pride ends. The comment itself got over 1 million likes in under 6 hours. Later that evening, a popular talk show invited Chuck for a virtual interview. When asked what changed in that moment, he replied, "I saw a man fighting not with me, but with himself. And when someone is fighting ego, they don't need an opponent." The studio audience fell silent before erupting into applause. The host asked, "So, Chuck, did you ever feel the need to prove you were still strong?" Chuck smiled slightly. "Strength doesn't need to prove anything. Weakness does." If you believe real fighters control their anger, type "True Warrior" in the comments right now. The story inspired not just fans, but professionals across industries. A well-known CEO quoted Chuck during a conference, "Leaders don't overpower, they empower." A police training organization even requested permission to use the footage for conflict de-escalation training, showing how calmness can win over confrontation. Psychologists discussed the incident, saying it was a perfect example of nonviolent dominance through confidence. Martial arts academies worldwide replayed the video in their sessions, telling students, "This is black belt behavior." Meanwhile, Seagal privately visited Chuck at his home a few days later. Off camera, away from the spotlight. They talked for over 2 hours. No reporters, no cameras, no crowd. What was said in that meeting remains unknown, but as Seagal left, someone overheard him say, "Thank you for not embarrassing me when you could have destroyed me." Chuck simply replied, "Any man can win a fight. A warrior wins the battle within." From there, Seagal shifted his public persona. He became more reserved, more respectful. In later interviews, he frequently referenced that moment as the day I rediscovered discipline. And Chuck? He didn't post about it, didn't give motivational speeches, didn't go live to capitalize on the attention. He just got up the next morning and trained. Because legends don't chase validation. They maintain preparation. The lesson the world needed. The video of Chuck Norris and Steven Seagal circulated globally, but unlike typical viral moments that fade, this one grew stronger each day. It didn't spread because of action, it spread because of character. In classrooms, corporate meetings, martial arts academies, and even military leadership workshops, the footage became a reference point. Not for combat, for composure. A global news outlet titled it, "Chuck Norris shows the world how to win with dignity." Major publications featured think pieces. Newspaper, "The KO That Never Landed," and why it was more powerful. Newspaper, "Humility Over Hype." Norris schools Seagal in martial arts philosophy. Newspaper, "Real Strength Needs No Audience." Even sports commentators discussed it during live broadcasts. One said, "Athletes train their bodies, but legends train their minds." That line went viral by itself. Big celebrities reacted too. A famous Hollywood actor reposted the clip. Chuck didn't just beat him, he uplifted him. A world champion boxer wrote, "The greatest strike is the one you never throw." A human rights advocate said, Leadership through restraint. That's the model we need. Kids in martial arts classes around the world watched it before training. In a dojo in Tokyo, a young student bowed and said, "One day, I want to be strong like Master Norris, calm." Seagal, honoring his word, stayed quiet but consistent. Months later, he made a guest appearance at a martial arts charity event. Unexpectedly, he opened his speech with gratitude. "There's a man I owe a public thanks. I walked into his gym ready to prove a point, and walked out ready to learn again." He looked at Chuck in the front row. They exchanged a nod. No tension, only truth. The audience stood and applauded. Not for the fight that didn't happen, but for the growth that did. Later that night, Chuck was asked by a journalist outside the venue, "Mr. Norris, how did it feel to see Steven speak that way tonight?" Chuck paused, looked up at the sky briefly, as he often does before sharing something meaningful. It felt like watching someone finally win a battle they'd been fighting alone. The reporter then asked, "Do you think the world learned something from that day?" Chuck smiled. "If even one person learns that strength isn't loud, then yes, it was worth it." He walked away. No further statement. No dramatic exit. Just a quiet, legendary departure. Weeks later, a message appeared on a black screen at the end of a martial arts documentary. "Strength is not in the strike. It's in the moment you decide not to throw it." Chuck Norris. That quote is now framed in gyms worldwide. If you believe no one should ever be judged by age, appearance, or ego, type respect in the comments. And if you think true warriors are those who walk away with dignity, not arrogance, hit subscribe for more powerful stories like this one. Would you want to see Steven and Chuck team up for a final tribute to martial arts? Yes or a no? This wasn't a fight. It was a lesson, and the world watched. Respect 1.